We're joined by Kamran Bokhari, Vice President for South Asian and Middle Eastern Affairs at Stratfor Global Intelligence. Thanks very much for coming in to speak to us. Just how concerned should we be about Hezbollah's claims? Do they have these game-changing arms, or is this perhaps Iran beefing up Hezbollah's capabilities?
2 points. One is that we should always be concerned about the movement of sophisticated weapons of any kind, especially in this region and in this conflict. But Sheikh Nasrallah's statement should be taken as rhetoric, because if they were really getting these weapons, they would not be telegraphing them so publicly, because as we've seen, Israel has demonstrated that it will not allow the transfer of these weapons. So by saying that they will get them, really runs counter to the whole idea that this is an enterprise that's done in secret.
You mentioned Israel's strikes. In theory, bearing in mind what Hezbollah is saying, their strikes have backfired, because if these weapons aren't getting through, then their airstrikes haven't worked at all.
I don't think that they're getting through. I think the fact that Nasrallah went on TV to make this statement shows that he's under some sort of pressure to actually counter these strikes without having to go to the military level, responding militarily. So I think that the strikes have achieved their goal. Have they completely eliminated the possibility of transfer of weapons? No. And the Israelis can be expected to continue to strike as and when they get the intelligence.
We heard the US and Russia proposing an international conference. Is it too late for diplomacy, or can they do something about this?
Whether it's too late or too early is sort of subjective, but what I think is the realization on the part of the United States that it would have been nice from the U.S. point of view to undermine Iranian influence through the toppling of the Bashar regime. But the cost of doing that is so high that that whole goal becomes a bit unattractive. If you remove Bashar, then you go from a pro-Iranian regime to a potential jihadist anarchy in Syria that could even be worse than what we have right now. So it's a very difficult situation, and therefore you see Secretary of State John Kerry going to Moscow and saying, we need to have a negotiated settlement. Can we come to terms on the broad contours of such talks? And
we hear that the opposition army is saying that many of its fighters are leaving, and they're joining, as you mentioned, their Islamist fighter groups.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that we at Stratfor have been publishing for quite some time, and it's now coming out in the open that indeed mainstream fighters are moving towards more radical groups, particularly those who subscribe to an al-Qaeda worldview. And so this is a very difficult situation, because if you are going to bank on rebels, then you need to have reliable partners. And clearly the radical Islamists who have an agenda that goes beyond Syria are not those partners.
Okay, Kamran Bokhari, thank you very much for coming in to speak to us. Thank you.
My pleasure.